Welcome to the Jack and Cole podcast. I am Cole, and joined with me, my marvelous co-host, Jack. How you doing, Jack?
Just chilling, enjoying the beautiful day. We finally got GPs back. Cole, how does it feel?
Very good, very good. I'm super excited to be attending one of these. Hopefully, I'm going to be doing it in Chicago in February. So if you find yourself there, let's jam some games. Today, pretty laid back video. I mean, all of these are not super structured, to be fair. We are going to be doing some recap of the Spotlight series, the SCG at SCG Con Atlanta. So we've got the metagame breakdown. We've got the top, deck list that we can go over, discussing breakout decks, cards we think are interesting. Um, that's pretty much it. Anything else you want to add to the agenda?
No, yeah, I was gonna say modern is in a beautiful spot. Nothing's really shifted to like the top yet. It's so just a beautiful jumble of homebrews and meta decks that are adapting. And so I think all the other formats are kind of just like Pioneer's kind of sorting itself out because there's not that many events, so that nobody's really innovating in the format right now. And then, Legacy is still healing from the bans recently, and so I think Standard is the format to talk about.
For sure. Absolutely. I'm definitely excited to go over some of the just general pieces of information here, and then we can dive into specific deck lists a little later. So what I've got in front of me is the metagame breakdown for day one. Just pretty simply put here, we've got the percentages, number of decks for each archetype. Now, I'm not I'm not able to verify the accuracy of each of the named deck lists in the archetypes. I know that that is potentially an issue, and that some people purposely misname their deck to kind of like skew the numbers. So I hope that this didn't happen. I hope that this is like an accurate representation of what we're working with. But with that kind of just like skepticism out of the way, let's talk about the two most prevalent decks in the format. Demir midrange, Gruul aggro, just right around the same number of decks, 210, 205 respectively at 14%. How are you feeling about that, Jack?
First off, I just want to reference how big this tournament was. This was a over 1,000 player tournament. This was a 9 round Swiss, cut to top eight, six. I think it was 6 round Swiss in day two. So this was a massive tournament. This was a 15 round tournament over 2 days, and so 200 people showing up with the same deck usually means that there's something like they have a reason for doing that, right? And Demir was the de facto deck of the tournament. You could say Gruul aggro was more prevalent, but just because it feels like there's more aggro decks when you play against aggro. Whereas like mid range is kind of just another deck. When you lose to an aggro deck and then you see another aggro deck, you're like, oh my god, they're everywhere. And that's kind of just like magic psychology, right? So I feel like Demir had all the tools to win the tournament. Something that I've heard people talk about is the fact that Golgari was number three was a huge surprise because people have kind of been thinking that Golgari is like on the downswing. It's not as good as it used to be. Like just in the face of all of the interaction and the card advantage, all of the cards that are in Golgari are kind of less powerful as they were before Foundations. And so I feel like Golgari being number three was like really interesting for day one. And to see a lot of people show up with Demir and a lot of people to show up with Gruul shows that the meta is in a pretty healthy spot because the number two deck is the aggro deck, the number one deck is the deck that deals with the aggro deck, and then you have all of these other in between mid range control piles going down the list. And so I feel like everybody's a little bit tired of Demir, but at like as it is, I feel like it's an okay deck to be at the top. If you play a Pyroclasm, half their creatures die. So
It's true. Yeah, I feel more or less the same way about what you had said there. I think the thing that I feel like we're missing from more or less this list is like the combo kind of deck. I was listening to the Grindcast, shout out to the MTG Grindcast, and they were just kind of talking about how like the super big over the top um, archetype is missing from this list of things, and it just kind of feels like the biggest thing you can do. is like the caretaker's talent stuff, and then after
Yeah.
that you're just kind of like, and they're to be fair, there's like the Esper, um, like Aura's deck with Zur the Enchanter or Zur, and like the domain decks doing that kind of stuff, and they can kind of pop off with Beanstalk. But I did just kind of want to mention that it doesn't seem like there's like a super dumb like Slogurk combo deck or like Aftermath Analyst deck that I can see from this list of decks. That said, I think that the metagame is fairly diverse. I like you said, the fact that Devere midrange and Gruul aggro are the most played decks. Is it possible that Monstrous Rage is a bit too good? Yes, but like having Monstrous Rage be one of the best spells in your format, I think is not a bad thing, to be completely fair, and it does promote a fairly interactive type of metagame, which I think we're seeing. Um, yeah, the Golgari deck is interesting. I think that like it just kind of looks like the choice deck for Unholy Annex. It's
Hmm.
just like you just want to be able to play Llanowar Elves into Unholy Annex and just kind of go from there. I'm not super interested. Like, it doesn't sound super interesting. I think that's probably a deck I would gravitate towards just because I love those colors. But like, it's what it's doing. I think it is
And I
also interesting that there's like one deck in this entire field that plays Llanowar Elves, and it's
Wow,
that it's that
you're
Golgari
actually so
midrange
right.
deck.
You're
And
so right.
it's very interesting that like maybe that's a symptom of these mono red decks and everyone having cut downs or lay down arms or burst lightning on turn one. Maybe it's a symptom of that, or maybe it's just the fact that like Llanowar Elves is not nearly the most powerful thing to be doing in this standard
Power
format.
crept,
Yeah,
the standards power crept Llanowar elves out of the format.
yeah,
I would also say the like you're talking about combo decks. As a red mage, I will say that Slick Shot plus Monstrous Rage is a combo. So we do we have the aggro decks if they go fast enough feel like a combo deck.
yeah.
And so like when you go like Heartfire Hero on one, the double strike mouse on two,
Mm.
and then you go like Monstrous Rage, like another pump spell, and you give your dude double strike, and
Yeah,
you hit him for
Manifold
16.
Mouse.
Yeah, you hit him for 16. Like that's pretty close to a combo if you're playing like just tap lands and you're like we're gonna be playing domain. I have removal on turn 5. Your opponent's just gonna kill you, and
Oh yeah,
so I definitely feel like aggro's so fast right now where it feels like combo, and I it kind of does push all the other janky slow like multi-piece synergy packages out of the format because you can't really do that when even your Demir deck is like killing you on turn 5 with combat damage.
yeah. That's a good point. So yeah, let's just kind of run through. We talked about the numbers. I'll just go through the numbers kind of quick. 9% or 124 decks registered for Golgari. Then 6% or 86 decks for domain control. 5%, 76 decks for mono white tokens featuring Caretaker's talent and the works. This next deck is pretty interesting. 5%, 73 decks, Esper Pixie. I think that it's good to just kind of go over here, see if we can find an example of this list. Um,
We
looks
got
like
11th
Lee got 11th here. So just kind of going through. I know that there's not. I wonder if there's like a visual view.
visual
There
view.
is. Yes. Perfect. Okay. So let's take a look and see what this deck is doing. I've lost to a version of this deck. It was like black white. I think that the combination of like nurturing pixie, hopeless nightmare, various random things, surprisingly good. Surprisingly good. Probably this town ain't big enough really adds um like a landscape to this deck that's different than what I've played against and just probably gives it a nice good late game. This town ain't big enough is so good. I'm not sure if you played against this card, but it's actually
Absolute. It's
frustrating to play against.
so I had an opponent whose draw was just hopeless nightmares, but they had two this town ain't big enough, and I had like threes and fours in my hand, and I was stuck on two lands, and I
Yeah.
literally lost all of my cards. The card is amazing. This deck is a perfect example of a metagame call. So this is a deck that preys on mono red and will destroy Demir because you have
Yeah.
all of these efficient threats that also allow you to, if your opponent plays a removal spell, you just pick up your threat and then it resets some ETB trigger.
Yeah.
And what's really cool is all of your removal is on permanence, right? Besides the cut downs and the go for the throats, right? You have Hopeless Nightmares. I've seen lists playing the Tithing Blade, the ETB. It's an artifact that ETBs
Mm,
to make an opponent sack.
okay.
There's a lot. There's
Oh
a
yeah,
lot
two
of
tithing
like
blade in this side here.
so you can just like pick up a Tithing Blade, pick up a Fear of Isolation, play Tithing Blade, play Fear of Isolation, pick up your Tithing Blade, have your Edict again for next turn, and basically you're able to just take out every threat that they play. If they start with the Scavenger, I think that's what it's called.
Mm,
If they start with the Scavenger and then they go like Hopeless Nightmare, or Fear of Miss or Nowhere to Run, if they go
yeah.
either one of those black cards, or they can go the Talent.
This talent, yeah, that's one we haven't mentioned yet, but that card's really good.
Their dude becomes a 2/2, and then any of their bounce spells become live because they can bounce the thing back, reset the trigger, and grow their scavenger again.
Yeah.
So the deck becomes a pseudo aggro deck, but has basically infinite removal because you're drawing cards constantly, you're constantly refueling,
Yeah.
and then the ability to just sideboard into Kaido and just be the blue black Demir deck, I think is really cool in this deck, in this
Yeah.
build. I don't know how good that is overall,
Yeah.
but yeah, this deck overall I think preys on the Gruul deck, and it preys on Demir, and so I
Yeah.
think that as 28% of the meta are those decks, this is a great call to be playing if you're playing a
Yeah.
deck.
Yeah, this sideboard looks specifically tuned for obviously the metagame that it's coming up against. I think pest control is a very smart choice if you're like if your predisposition is that I'm gonna have a hard time against pop hatch control, offspring tokens, the token decks in general, Heartfire Hero, Swift Spear, like there's a lot of things that this has coverage against and it cycles. So like the fact that you're in black white I think is really smart um to have access to pest control here. Yeah, this deck seems good. I will mention one other thing before we move on is like Shelter by Ghost is nuts. I am working on like building the Jeskai Convoke deck on Arena. I've just started like playing standard again, so I'm getting my collection back up for it. Um, and one thing that I noticed is that like Shelter by Ghost is good, but it's not amazing if you put it on a 1/1. Like it's good if you can put it on a body that's any in any way significant. And so I think having access to cards like Fear of Isolation, having access to cards like Optimistic Scavenger means that you can put it on a super super beefy nurturing pixie or a Fear of Isolation. So I think that that's just a smart deck building decision. Also, Fear of Isolation is cool because it kind of works with the same like bounce, the bounce stuff. But yeah, this deck is neat. I haven't really been paying too much attention to standard, so I wonder if this has been going on for a while. But it seems like a fairly new deck. I'm excited about this one.
I've been grinding a lot of standard on Arena, and I haven't played against this deck at all. But in the past 2 days, I've played against it twice, and so it's like the numbers are going up because I think this was like a brew by somebody. Somebody innovated it before the tournament.
Yeah.
Um, but then
Yes, let's keep going. I'll be quick on this until we find something, you know, mono red aggro, 5% 66 decks, Jeskai Convoke, 4% 56 decks, Azorius Oculus, 3% or 44 decks. A little bit of a lower showing for Oculus. I think that maybe the hype of this deck has died down a little bit. Any thoughts on that?
this is like one of the most powerful decks in the format, but it's so interactable. You can counter the reanimate spell. You can just exile the creature or kill it. Yes, they have a lot of removals, like removal now, but like there's everybody's playing like some form of graveyard hate in the sideboard,
Hmm.
and it's a deck that wins game one. And then if you have like, it's a deck where I have Leyline of the Void, and then if they don't draw their bounce spells, it just single-handedly turns off half their deck because half their deck is reanimate spells and the other half is like the threats that need to be in the graveyard,
Hmm.
and they can't cast Oculus if they don't have a graveyard.
That's a good
So
point. And Rest in Peace does exist in the standard format. We just got Leyline
mhm.
of the Void. Yeah, that's it's tough out there for our boy, the
the,
eyeball.
the eyeball.
uh yeah, okay. Let me keep doing this. So Teamer Otters, 2%, 32 decks, Sultai Beans, 2%, 12 decks, Zorius Aggro. looks like a Regal Bunnycorn deck. 2% 25 decks. Selesnya tokens, 2% 23 decks. And then I'll go through the rest of these 2% 23 decks for Boros Mice, Boros Aggro, 21%, or 21 decks for 1%. And then the other category, interestingly enough,
Other.
25% of the metagame, 362 decks. So a fairly diverse other category that we don't actually get to dip into, whether they are misregistered, like misnamed on purpose, or they just had a hard time getting them into there, or they legitimately don't fit into any of these. Um, remains to be seen.
It's probably raccoons, lizards, frogs, squirrels, goblins,
Yeah,
elves, humans, merfolk, fairies. Like
yeah,
there's like a billion other archetypes.
vampires. Yeah,
Vampire, yeah, exactly. Like throw in all the kindreds.
I did just want to mention this Leslie tokens deck here because it's got 2% of the metagame, 23. Oh, excuse me. Same numbers, 2%, 23 decks. And it won the tournament. And I just kind of wanted to peek at the deck here. I know it's a little bit of a spoiler for later on, but just to kind of look at it, I had not seen this deck. I saw Doomwake on stream yesterday playing it. I think this is the deck that he ended up playing in the tournament, the physical tournament, with maybe some differentiations here. Um, but yeah, very interesting. This looks like, and I excuse me, this is another Llanowar Elves deck in the metagame, which I think gives this deck a particularly unique boost. But this is a collector's cage, like token deck that has some pretty explosive turns that you can execute. Um,
This
any
deck is
any thoughts
insane.
on this deck here?
I actually played an RCQ and I lost to this deck and I didn't know what the hell it was doing. I just assumed it was a Caretaker's Talent deck that was playing Collector's Cage and the Evangelist because I never saw the other cards. I just saw Overlords, Lanny E, Virtue, and the Collector's Cage. And then I died to the the tokens and they just chained value pieces together.
Yeah,
And I just thought it was Caretaker's Talent, but this deck is extremely efficient and it really preys on the other decks in the format. It's kind of crazy. Being able to what can we highlight over what is it? The top left card.
Melira. Yeah, I can't
Yeah.
expand it, but it basically says there's anti-poison text that does not matter, but you can exile her to choose another target creature or artifact, and when it's put into your graveyard this turn, you return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control. So pretty
You keep your
good.
stuff around. You make sure that if you need to have something survive, you have it survive, and you just get
Yeah.
value. Like it's a good cost. It's a good aggressive threat where you're able to go like Lanny E on one, they kill your Lanny E, you go your 2 drop, and then you keep setting up for next turn, and then
Yeah.
eventually if you have a big threat that you're gonna win the game with, like your Evangelist enters, makes a token, dies, makes a token, you sack it when it dies,
Hmm.
pick up the Evangelist to your hand, you can do it again.
For sure.
Like
Yeah, Melira is good. And I think you get the fact that you can save Collector's Cage because it's an artifact is an interesting and probably underexplored part of that card specifically. It's also 3 power, which means that you don't necessarily have to like have a 2 drop and like a 1 drop and you don't you already have that stapled on the card so you could play Sanguine Evangelist and already have the Collector's Cage ready to go. Um,
it does not die to burst lightning or cut down.
That's true. That's true. So this deck is very innovative. Sandstorm Salvager. Like I think these big scorecards are starting to like pick up. Obviously, we're starting to have big standard tournaments, but these cards are pushed. Like Collector's Cage is
Very.
is is pushed. Sandstorm Salvager also a pushed
Can we
Magic card. Yeah,
can we read Sandstorm Salvager?
it's a 2 and a green for a 1/1. It makes a 3/3 golem when it enters, and you can pay 2 generic and tap it to put a 1/1 counter on each creature token you control, and they all
Ugh.
gain trample. So
Ugh.
you just kind of get to do everything with these cards.
Offspring.
It's not a super busted deck. It does fold to lots and lots of interaction. The offspring
Pyroclasm.
mechanic, yeah, like the offspring mechanic helps against spot removal, so you have some insulation there. Virtue's a 2 for 1, Overlord's a 2 for 1, so you've got some insulation there. Evangelist, and then the last thing I'll say about this deck is Parting Gust is a very good card. I think right now, white instant, you can exile target non-token creature. if the gift wasn't promised, return that creature to the battlefield under its owner's control with a +1/+1 counter at the beginning of the next end step, and you can gift a fish to basically make it a removal spell. Give your opponent a tapped 1/1 blue fish, and you exile their non-token creature. But if you can also use it as just a blink spell, white, white, you blink it with a +1/+1 counter. Lots of flexibility. It exiles, so you don't have to deal with like unstoppable slasher. Like a lot of the Golgari threats are invalidated there. Um, and the coverage is insane because like you just get to exile whatever you want. Also, Get Lost is insane and has lots of flexibility as well, but giving your opponent 2 map tokens in a format that has Emberheart Challenger is just tough, so it makes sense that they're exploring other avenues.
Flickering your evangelist is dumb.
Yeah, no, for sure. Lots and lots of good stuff going on with this deck, so lots of good. Okay, and then let's go ahead and move on to the day 2 metagame, so just kind of commit these numbers to memory.
Yeah, so the thing we want to the thing we want to watch, where did Golgari go and where did Pixie go?
Yeah, so where did Golgari go? He was 3rd. It went down to 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th. A pretty big drop there. It went from 9% of the metagame to 5% of the metagame. Esper Pixie went from 5% of the metagame, 10% of the metagame. So they basically swap places, is what it looks like. And notably, Demir Midrange and Gruul Aggro increased their metagame share after day 2, which to me is not altogether too surprising, just because it had such a lion's share of the metagame to begin with.
Yeah.
Um, Looks like the other category did not do super well. 15%. I mean, that's not terrible. It would technically be the third.
There's 52 other decks in the day 2. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Look at it like that.
And then
But
let's see what domain did. 6% to 8%. Fairly good conversion right there. Let's take a look and see. I want to take a look and see what the tokens conversion rate is. 23, 2%, 12, 2%. So almost half, more than half
so they won
of
their matches.
like a 50% conversion rate for Selesnya tokens is pretty insane. 12,
Yeah, because
23.
it
Yeah,
was 24.
that's more than 50% um, for
Punch
Selesnya.
through.
Yeah, punch through for sure. Let's see.
For
Oculus had,
example, yeah,
yeah,
I was gonna say
for
look at
example,
Oculus.
Oculus had 44
Oculus.
decks and 11 of them converted to day 2. So that's not a great conversion rate.
It's like a 33%
Yeah. Um,
or 1/4.
yeah, more than 1/4 of both Gruul aggro and Demir midrange converted. That's decent. I think seeing like a closer to 50% conversion rate could
Oh, dude,
potentially be more likely with a deck with smaller deck lists and Dime 1 with
did we
Selesnya
do that
tokens,
with
but
we do that same metric with Pixie? Number of Pixies is 34 in day 2.
oh yeah, so 34,
73, 35.
35. So that's
73 and 35. That's literally over
it's
half.
well, it's not over half because 35 is
No?
half of
30.
70.
You're right.
So it's a
There's
little under half, but still. So those it looks like those are kind of the topics of conversation, which is cool because those are the breakout decks that I feel like are coming from the tournament there. So let's see if there's anything else that's like super standout-ish here. This guy Convoke did not do well. 56 decks converting into 9 in day 2
mono white tokens had 76 day 1.
into 16.
16.
Not
Okay.
amazing.
Yeah, so
We're
what about
seeing some
domain?
trends here. Domain 28 day 2, 86 day 1. So it did
That's
a
okay.
little better,
But for that
but
gives
not
us
great.
like the meta reference for how well Pixie did, right? To convert 50% is insane.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so that's enough with the metagame. Let's go ahead and take a look at the top 8 deck lists. We already looked at Selesnya tokens. That was the winning list, 10, 1, and 1 in the hands of Charles Tyler. So sorry if I butchered your last name. Uh, Da- Davin Frankowski on Selesnya Control. This is a Beza Caretaker's Talent deck. Sunfall, more of like a control-ish type style deck here. Um, So interesting that green white could look so different, and both, probably get first and second respectively. Also, shout out to my absolute love of my life, Vivian Reed. Uh,
Vivian's so good. I just want to point out two things. So, first off, I think that Caretaker Talent's the best deck in the format, secretly. If you have a tournament, I think like every RCQ I've gone to has been dominated by mono white control. And when when a deck like this plays the mirror, they always draw. Nobody can ever kill anybody. They both are at 40 life, and they've killed each other's board like 6 times.
yeah,
There's two authority of the consoles in the main, and I feel like this card is huge because if you play against any red player, my deck, I play goblins,
he's got five.
strict,
He's got four in the 75.
strictly loses to authority of the consoles. The card literally wins you the game.
Yeah,
Taking away your haste threats when the deck is like all removal is so important.
yeah.
Also, they play a season. If you scroll up, they play a one of. See, I think it's what's it called? What's that
Season of the
sorcery?
Burrow. Yeah.
Yeah. So they can. What are the modes in that? Can you read that?
Yes, you get 5 rabbit paws. You got 5 paws worth of stuff, and then you can use as many paws as you'd like on the following: 1 paw, create a 1/1 rabbit creature token. 2 paws, exile target non-land permanent. Its controller draws a card. 3 paws, return target permanent card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield with an indestructible counter on it. You can like reanimate your caretaker's talent with an indestructible counter on it, which is nice.
So they just exile two things and then they just
Yeah,
make a one
and they
one.
make a 1/1. That's exactly right.
And it's really good.
It is really good.
Uh,
It's weird. For Authority of the Consoles in the 75, my 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 person is playing 3 main decks: Seized from Slumber, uh, Draft Champion, m mono white. Like, this is an actual deck building decision where you're saying, "I'm gonna be playing against a ton of tapped creatures." So, Seized from Slumber makes sense. Elspeth might make sense because 'cause they're gonna be attacking me. Like,
Split up.
how bad does it feel for me to play Authority of the Console on one, or you like having an Ember Heart Challenger in your hand, and then it coming into play tapped, you attacking with it, and then it dying. Like, just get
That's
so
the
much
that,
value from that for sure.
that's
So
this that's and split up is such a blowout with authority of the
yeah,
consoles because they're like, okay, I'm gonna set up for next turn. Here's two tapped creatures,
yeah,
and they're like, no.
yeah. This deck is just infinite removal. So shout out to this person for making it happen. I think green white makes a lot of sense. I don't really personally love Overlord of the Hotwoods, but I understand why it's in there. It helps ramp out into your 5 drops. So
Yeah, I think it's not the greatest, but I think Vivian Reed is an amazing spot right now.
yeah, I like Vivian a lot. Okay, Gruel Aggro, number 3 by Stanley Hartman.
Not
Uh,
much to talk about
not
here.
much to talk about
It's
here.
just run of the mill. They are playing the fling and they're
Mm,
playing the turn inside out. Oh, okay. So this is actually a Leyline of Resonance deck. Is so this would be curious to see. There's different variants of Gruul aggro, and I wonder if in the metagame share they're all lumped together. The Leyline of Resurgence deck is different than
mhm.
the caretaker or not caretakers, the
No, for sure.
innkeeper's talent. And so it would be interesting to see how many are the resonance version and how many are non-resonance. But
Yeah,
this deck,
this deck's
you
clean.
start start with the ley line, play a scamp. Turn two. You you double monstrous rage or you turn and set out your scamp.
And you
You
kill
deal
him.
damage, you sack it, you throw it, you win.
Yeah,
That's
that's
it.
it.
That's the game.
Well played, Doctor. Um,
GG. Next game.
Sultai Beans, number 4 um by Nicholas. Let's go ahead and take a look at his deck list. 8, 2, and 1. This is looks like it's a take on the blue green bounce deck. I'm interested to see what he's playing black for.
So
One anoint from
it,
the affliction, one go for the throat, and a swarm weaver
it's the Vona's
in the
vortex.
sideboard.
It's the Vona's vortex. These decks are starting to play black so they can have more removal sideboard, but
Ah,
they also want to be able to have an unsummon that you can kick to just bottom something. It's not the greatest, but I mean I've played it against this deck. If they're able to just like start this towning big enough, their innkeeper or
oh,
storm
I
chasers
get
talent.
it. We've got the analyze the pollen bushwhack tech. Interesting that the
Bushwhack
swamp is not in the
bushwhack good.
main. I don't know how I feel about. Like,
Ooh, I didn't see that.
I need to board my swamp in to kick my Rona's Vortex in the main. Because Gloomdale Verge only is on oh, if you control an island or a swamp. Excuse me, just kidding. So you're a little bit more flexible there,
Um,
but still, not
so yeah,
having your other 6 sources getting you a swamp, yeah, I'm sure this is a deck building
it
decision,
can be
like,
tough.
you did well enough. This deck is very good.
Cool.
It's very
Yeah,
good.
that's cool. It's a
Uh,
little bit slow against red, but I would say red is its only bad matchup, honestly.
yeah, but, like,
I
the unsummon, like, mono unsummons is, like and then you just flash in, like, a 5/5, tap down your stuff.
very
It's a
very strong.
pretty good recipe, I think.
This deck folds to Leyline of the Void.
Mhm,
Um,
for sure.
not hard. It doesn't hard fold because they can like bounce your Leyline if they're playing the version that has the into the Flood Maw instead of unsummon.
Yeah.
But
Did I see?
this
I did
deck,
see up the beanstalk, okay. I was just double checking.
yeah.
Okay. Rule
So
aggro by,
is this? I was
Julian.
gonna say is that is this is a
This is a
just
different
a
one.
normal. This is a normal mid range
Yeah, they're both Gruul
Gruul
aggro
aggro.
listed. Yeah. So you're right. So they're not separated by their just the fact that they're Gruul, they go fast. Or
So
Mirrodin,
this
Barbed Batter Fist. What the hell?
it looks like this player is cooking and their cooking paid off.
Oh,
Um,
Barbed Batter Fist for the Emberheart Challenger tech.
with the manifold mouse.
Uh, becomes a target spell or ability. First time each turn. Yeah, okay. So it's just another way to trigger your Emberheart Challengers. Man, we're going deep.
So this is someone who believes in the three ofs and one ofs philosophy. If you want to play a lot of things but you don't know what to cut, you have certain things that are flexible and those are one ofs, and then you have like pillars of your deck which are three ofs, and then like your four ofs are the cards that just fill the voids.
Well, yeah. Well,
And
the four of seem like the pillars. Looks like you've got two
mhm,
threes and you're like Screaming Nemesis, Pop Hatch Recruit, which those are good cards, but they're like, I don't know if they're necessary to your game plan, this game plan, right? Hired
and you
Claw's
can board them
good.
out.
Yeah,
The
questing is good.
hired claw is insane. With all your random damage, you can just like constantly pump it if you have nothing else to do.
Yeah, I like
And
this deck.
then
I hadn't actually thought about Innkeeper's Talent plus Everheart Challenger. That shows you how little I've played Standard. But this seems like a good combo wombo for sure. So very
yeah,
nice.
this deck's very powerful. I played this deck yesterday at on Monday and barely got there because we were in a board stall. We were both staring at each other because he was at 8 and I was at 6,
Hmm.
and I had like 3/1/1s and 2 lords, and so they were 3/3s. But I couldn't attack him because he had a screaming nemesis, so I would have just died on the crackback. So I passed, and then he played a bunch of creatures, and so we were in a board stall, and it went back to my turn. But one of my lords was a dropkick bomber, so I made my 3/3s fly, and two
Let's
of them were
go.
scamps. So it was just
Nice.
15. It was just 15 in the air.
Hell
And he
yeah.
was like, "Can I read that card?" And I was like, "Yes, I cracked boxes for this card."
Yeah. You have not read this card before. Here's this card. You have no idea what it says. Welcome to the new era of Standard.
I said, "Remember, I said when goblins fly, it's today."
Yeah. Okay. Marcio Engelberg with mono white tokens, pretty classic. It's I assume mono white caretaker's talent deck. Beza, nothing special here. I'm gonna move on.
Best deck in the format. I think this is the best deck in the format.
Hell yeah. Seventh place, Gruul aggro. Once again, what flavor of Gruul is this though? This is not. This is the
Mid range.
Innkeeper's talent deck. The numbers
Yeah.
are a little bit
I
different
call
here.
it's crazy when you call this deck the mid range deck and the other deck the aggro deck because the other deck's basically just a combo deck. It's a turn two combo deck.
Yeah, I they're
And
both super
this is an aggro deck.
aggressive. You know, they're both playing pump spells. I differentiate it because you're playing Innkeeper's talent and like whereas you could be playing Slick Shot Show Off, you're playing Innkeeper's talent. So like it's the mid-range deck compared to the Leyline of Resonance deck, but it's still
Yeah.
like kill you super fast. I do like four Screaming Nemesis. I think if I was playing Monstrous Rage and I was going through the the trouble of putting pump spells in my deck, I'd want Screaming Nemesis because you can do funny things with pump spells, block, Like, if you're in a board stall and they're like, "Okay, I'm gonna push some damage through," you can, like, pump spell their creature, block a screaming nemesis, nug them for a bunch of damage, so, um, yeah, I think this deck is cool. Little Land Residence is super busted, I think I would just play that flavor, but, I mean, you can't go wrong. I think that this is, like, super solid.
Scorching Shot has been overperforming whenever I look at
Mhm.
sideboards. Scorching Shot just being able, even though it's a sorcery,
Yeah.
2 mana, it's
It's
replaced
your, like, go for the throat.
Witchstalker Frenzy. Yeah, it's not, it's Witchstalker Frenzy.
Yeah.
The decks used to play that as like a 2 mana spell,
Mhm.
but now you're right. They just play it as go for the throat.
Right, and it looks like Demir Midrange snuck into the 8th place slot. Noah won on Demir Midrange. Let's take a look and see what we got here. Any spice? There's a spell stutter, standard
Kind of
stuff here.
fairy sub theme because they got the instant
Yeah,
tap make 2 guys.
Faebloom Trick is a very good card, I think. So I would be on the lookout for people playing this card. It's definitely one of those things where you just play Faebloom Trick, you untap and you play Enduring Curiosity, and you draw 2 cards. Seems pretty
Really
standard
good.
there. Yeah. Or you, like, make sure that you can cast your Kaido.
Ooh,
So,
we got the Withering Torment. We got the Withering Torment in the sideboard,
yep,
which
the
is
1/0.
the answer to Authority of the Consoles. It's the way that you kill
Hmm.
the enchantments that you're gonna lose to and the creatures that you can't kill.
Yeah.
It's just a murder. It's a murder at instant speed.
I will say Tishana's Tidebender remains undefeated. This card just it has an unending number of utility. Like,
I didn't I the winning in to for the top 8 at min max this past weekend. I lost to Tishana's on my Enduring Courage, so that my Krenko wouldn't get haste,
yeah.
and then I died in the air. I was like, oh, I was gonna make enough tokens to just kill him outright, but he
Yep.
was like Tishana's, and I was like,
Yeah, it just straight up does it to you. So that's the top 8, the metagame breakdown. Pretty simple stuff here. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. I think, unless you wanted to do something else, we just kind of call it here.
no, this has been perfect. I appreciate you guys hanging out, and I just want to say real quick, shout out to FlexLot. Shout if you want sideboard guides, it's a great tool. The website's amazing, and the utility is great. Shout out to Team FlexLot for the grind for letting us grind games and get better. Shout out to Borsat Gaming for hosting all the games that we play and we review on MTG Chicago. Shout out to MTG Chicago. If you enjoy paper gameplay, check out their channel. And shout out to Energy for hosting the Energy series and letting us play on Wednesdays. It's Modern and Fridays is Legacy. So gotta shout out the homies.
Hell yeah, absolutely. Well, it's been real, all my friendos. You guys have a wonderful rest of your 2025. I'm sure we'll be back soon to record more content. But until then, take care. Peace.
Peace.